We are back for episode 2 of Snow Search, looking for snow and cold the week of December 11th. It's meteorologist Joe Martucci here. I'm joined by my weather brother Sean Sublette. Sean, not too much cold and snow, although I did see a few flurries here in New Jersey the past couple of days.
Yeah, it's been tough getting the snow here. We've had some snow on the western side of the Appalachians with this little clipper. I think we talked about this actually a week or so ago. This little clipper that was going to go through and is putting out a little snow in the West Virginia high terrain and a few flurries in the Virginia mountains. But that's about it. We're still waiting for something real, for something serious.
Yeah, we're waiting for something serious. And for a lot of us here that's listening, it's been over a year since we've seen something serious. I don't know if they're doing this down by you, Sean, in Virginia, but I know here in New Jersey, New York, Philadelphia, they're doing longest 1 inch snow droughts, and it's near the top of the charts. So, Sean, just take everybody through what Snow Search is. We're getting into our second season of this, so just a refresher here.
Yeah, so let's talk about this a little bit. Mostly what we look at for this time of the year in Snow Search, we do a deep dive on what to expect over the next week. Not so much these next few days, but the following business week. For in this case, it's going to be the week of December 11th. This is a broad outlook for what kind of storm risk or threats are out there. This is not going to be specific like your place is going to get 6 inches on this day. We're just not quite that good yet. But an idea of what's out there, what's over the horizon, what kind of things could we be looking for in these next 6 to 12 days or so. We'll do this every Wednesday right on through the winter and into the spring if conditions warrant, as they say, Joe. But
Yeah.
one of the things we have to look at are these longer term oscillations or patterns we see in the atmosphere. One of them is the North Atlantic oscillation. Take people through that.
Yeah, the North Atlantic Oscillation always gets a little bit of buzz during the winter here, even outside of the weather community. It's a key driver of winter weather. And really, this looks at the pressure differences between Iceland and the Azores, which is off the Portugal coast of Europe. And depending on what that pressure difference is, we're either in a negative mode, which can bring cold and snowy conditions to the Northeast and the mid Atlantic parts of the South as well. It's well known for that. When it's in a positive mode, the jet stream runs from west to east. We get a lot of Pacific air, and it's typically milder air. And yeah, we can get some storms, but they're mainly going to be rainstorms. Now, if you watch Snow Search last winter, you saw these charts a lot. We almost did this every week, and I think we'll keep it because it shows a good idea of where we are and where we're going. So we look at that NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, and it's pretty neutral through the end of next week. So to me, that means not much influence on that. It's a 50-50 shot of the jet stream being either wavy, up and down, or more west to east here. There's also some other indexes we look at. So we have the Arctic Oscillation, fairly similar to the North Atlantic Oscillation, although this looks to be on the negative side early next week and then trending towards neutral. Now, that to me, and what that typically means is we get stormy with some cold shots. It doesn't have to be long lasting cold, but some cold shots, especially as you go from that swing from negative to neutral. Then we have the PNA index. That's the Pacific North Atlantic index here. That is pretty much on that zero line. So to me, that means little influence. So when you combine these three together and you look at those indices, not much influence, leaning a little bit towards colder and stormier here from New York all the way down to North Carolina. So, Sean, you're going to actually look at our weather pattern here for next week, according to the forecast models, to get some broad ideas of what this could look like.
Yeah, you look at those oscillations and those kind of scale down to what the actual weather pattern will be on any given day. So this is up at what we call the 500 millibar level. It's about 18,000 feet up in the sky. The jet stream level, another way to think about this. And H is big areas of high pressure, L is areas of low pressure where we tend to have storminess. So we start this on Monday and watch through about Tuesday and Wednesday. There's a massive ridge of high pressure that builds back to the southeast coast. If you like snow, you don't want any part of this, but this tells us that there is no chance at all that there's going to be any snow early next week in the middle Atlantic or even in the Northeast. Now, As we work to the back end of the week, that area of high pressure builds offshore, and we do see a couple of weaknesses, a couple of small areas of low pressure developing in the Midwest, and those are going to kind of make a run at the Northeast into the Thursday and Friday timeframe next week. They do not look particularly strong, but they may be just enough to bring some snow. We don't think so much to the Southeast, but into the interior Northeast. So here's what that might look like. We will start the clock at first thing on Monday morning, and you see in blue there, that's the storm that's coming this weekend. That's largely just rain that will end as some snow in upstate New York and into New England. But after that lifts out on Monday morning, you go through Monday afternoon, you go through Tuesday, you go through Wednesday. There's a whole lot of nothing out there, as I mentioned to you, with that big cell of high pressure. Again, and then we get into Thursday, that begins to build offshore, and you see that little blue blob there in southern Pennsylvania. One of the things we want to remind people: don't get too locked in. Oh, it's going to snow in Carlisle. No, but we do think this tells us this is the general area we need to be watching on. Basically, Pennsylvania, New York, and New England going into Thursday and Friday of next week. And then it's probably going to be dry again. So as we think longer term, then we have to think about the dreaded polar vortex, don't we,
The
Joe?
polar vortex, right, Sean? You got to do with that deep
gotta,
booming
gotta
voice.
do with the jazz hands
Yes,
and
with the
everything.
jazz hands, the polar vortex. So the polar vortex, and yes, we get influenced by the polar vortex, but it's actually a complicated process here because what we're looking at right now is what we call the 10 millibar layer. Sean, that's higher than planes fly. That's way, like, keep
Way,
thinking high and keep going
way,
higher than that. I mean, we're
way up.
100,000 feet high. So it's very high. That's in the stratosphere.
Yes.
Now what happens is if you get the polar vortex to, in this case, stretch down, and that's kind of what you're seeing here next week. The center is over the North Pole, but you see those blues getting into New England and parts of the East Coast. Then you could see a reflection of that at the surface 1 to 2 weeks later. And what's 1 to 2 weeks later after the 14th, Sean?
Oh, that would be Christmas, wouldn't it,
It
Joe?
would be Christmas. You would be correct on that. Christmas and the New Year. So, what I'm like to say is that the first domino has been pushed on the line of dominoes, but that does not mean that every domino is going to fall. It's just we're starting the process. We will have to monitor this to see, does what happens in the stratosphere translate down to the surface around Christmas and around New Year's. I'm in New Jersey. What I've been telling people is, hey, we have about a 6 to 10% shot of a white Christmas on any given year. I'll say 20 or 25% chance of seeing it. It's still below 50, but it's a little better than usual. And that's because of this stretch of the polar vortex. Now, sometimes the polar vortex splits into two, and you can see that one piece drift into the Northeast or really anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. This is a stretching event. In terms of what they mean, there's been a little research that suggests that if you like the big snow and the big cold, stretching might actually be more for you than splitting, but we're still working out the kinks of that. Dr. Judah Cohen, who we had on our Across the Sky podcast that we do every Monday, was talking about just that. So, Sean, that being said, why don't you take us home with what we need to know?
And one little addendum to that, he was on the Weather Channel yesterday talking about this, and this kind of feeds into what we were talking about in our winter outlooks just 2-3 weeks ago, that it looks like it's not so much December, but getting into January and February. And there is a lot of buzz into people who really look at these long-term outlooks that there's some things are going to get wild around the first of the year. But for the shorter term, the next, let's say 6 to 12 days or so, do look for that New England snow to fade Monday, dry most of the week, really from New England down to the Carolinas. And we think the best chance of snow mid to late next week, Buffalo to the Berkshires, maybe Pennsylvania, but we think for most instances, it's going to be a little farther north than that. In Virginia, sorry, man, we're just going to have to wait a little bit longer.
It's still early. It's still early here.
Early.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, astronomical winter is still not until the 21st. So there's a lot of time ahead of us.
Absolutely. And I should say, too, the snow later in the week, right, Sean? Fairly light for those areas
Oh
in
yeah,
upstate New York.
that's a quick hitter. This would be, a 1 to 3 inches. Is the concept that we're talking about now. It's not a bury you for a week kind of snow. So no,
Exactly.
not at all.
Cool. All right. Well, that wraps it up for snow search, at least the weather part. We have to do what we've been searching for all week, weather or otherwise. Sean, go for it.
You want to know? I've been
Yes.
searching for my Florida State fans because they be unhappy.
Yes, they be unhappy.
So
Yes.
that's the thing, and I feel for them because the 1994 Penn State football team went undefeated, and this was way before there was a playoff, and we didn't get anything. That team didn't get anything, went undefeated, and the voters just kind of gave the thing to Nebraska. So I feel the Florida State pain from 1994.
I think two things can be true with this. I think Florida State fans can feel very upset and rightfully so. I think Alabama is probably the better of the two teams at this point in time. You saw that if you watch college football, you saw the reaction in the Michigan watch
Yeah.
party when they saw Alabama. They thought it was going to be Florida State, started cheering, and it was like, ah. So that might have told you everything there, but yes, I do
It's
feel for everybody there. I'm going to switch topics though from college football to beer, Sean, because
oh
there is a beer in Pennsylvania. There's a brewery which you might be familiar with called Trogs
oh
over in
yes,
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or somewhere around there, and they have a beer called Mad Elf, which just tastes like Christmas in a bottle.
I've heard
Well,
of that one.
speaking of bottle, they said that there's cans of this, or there has been cans of this. So I'm curious. I haven't seen any cans. I've seen the bottles, but I'm curious to see if anybody knows where I can get cans of Mad Elf, maybe in New Jersey specifically, so I don't have to drive too far. I'd be interested because that would
I'll
look pretty
check in
awesome.
my local big box beer store here, see if I can find something for you.
All right. Well, thank you, Sean. I appreciate
You
that.
bet, man. You
All
bet.
right.
Because we'll be at AMS, the American Meteorological Society
Yes.
thing in Baltimore at the
Yes.
end of January. And
Yes.
we're
The
weather geeks, so we're excited about that.
5,000 weather enthusiasts, meteorologists, whatever you call them, in one spot.
Converging on Baltimore Harbor.
That's right. So, all right, we're going to wrap it up for this episode of Snow Search. He's meteorologist Sean Sublette. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. Check out our Across the Sky podcast, too. New episodes every Monday, wherever you get your podcast.